again. Hi, everyone, and hi also to folks who are listening to this later. This is call two of this exploration around inner casteism, rather. And for those of us who've stayed through this journey and done the inner work, thank you for your grace, for your courage, for staying through the discomfort. Uh, most of us I see here on the screen were present the last time as well, except I think Raji, you missed the previous call. Good to have you here. I know Kavya had said she'll join us in a few minutes. And otherwise, yeah, we probably have a smaller circle than the last time. The plan for today, of course, is to work with what's already emerged and then also to consider a little bit of what's the possibility going forward to continue the work within ourselves. The proposed structure is for us to do a quick check-in in the larger group, then step into breakout rooms for a little while to discuss in a deeper manner what emerged for you through the week. And then we come back, share, and then look at the way forward. So that's going to be the proposed structure. And we will tweak it if needed, depending on what emerges. So would love to hear a quick check-in in terms of what are you bringing into this circle. You don't have to go through everything around what's emerged. We will have space for that in the breakout room, but anything that you'd like to name as we begin. And since it's a small group, I'd love to hear all your voices instead of doing this on chat. Girija?
Yeah. So I'll be honest that I felt a bit rushed with the reflections and I don't feel I've given it enough time. But what I bring in is so I didn't have these powerful questions before 19th of July. Like I knew that there was some questions of layers of consciousness that I wanted to sit with, but I didn't have the questions with me. And also maybe I didn't have the will to put down the questions myself, like both. And so what I come with right now is I feel kind of empowered that at least now I have those questions to sit with. I did think through all the questions for a bit, not deep enough, but for a bit. So I know that there is a journey I can take. So I feel confident that I can take it. And also I come with the curiosity of like, how did it go for everyone? And what are the reflections I can learn from? Because the page where people were sharing, the sharings were so powerful. And they were also triggering other layers of thinking inside me. So really looking forward to the community sharing. So that's where I am right now.
Thanks, Girija.
I can go next.
Yes, Sunil?
So today I bring us a heightened sense of awareness, I think, as these questions, which you've given us in the week, made me realize, and as Girja said, sort of awakened me to things which were possibly there in Earth, but I didn't notice or pay attention to. And I suddenly feel that a lot of things have, come out or come, at least I'm giving them light or giving them space within myself and within my consciousness. And Gulcha used the word empowered. I feel refreshed. I feel glad that I've given them space to come out. So I'm feeling sense of refreshment.
Thanks, Sonia. while Rohini and Kavya settle. Anyone else? Raji, Shreya, Poonam?
I can speak, or I'm still like thinking. So my name is Raji Manjari Pokhrel. I am Nepali. I live in Kathmandu, and currently I'm in Pune right now. And I couldn't join last week, but I watched the video and I participated in some of the writing. So I work in largely in mental health as a therapist, and just like to write about mental health. And in my experience of being Brahmin in the context of Nepal, mostly experiencing living in Kathmandu and then in the US, um, caste has been on my mind for a very long time. And I think one of the things that the exercises really did for me was to confront this sort of this, I've been struggling with this self-righteous feeling, you know, like why I know I've spent a lot of time, and luckily, like with my parents also, we talk a lot about this and how they sort of got acquainted, you know, when they were younger around caste. And so I have really struggled with sort of being in spaces where there are non-Brahmins and folks of other castes and indigenous folks, folks who see them, who are Dalit identified, like going there and sort of sometimes venting about Brahmins, you know. It's like another form of taking up space, right? And so it's like made me really uncomfortable the last, especially after coming back to Nepal, which was in 2015, because one of the things in the ways that caste and race sort of have played out is that for me being in the US, there were a lot of ways in which I could sort of say, okay, I'm a brown person there and I'm marginalized. But then I'm upper caste, you know, even within the Nepali community, South Asian, largely like Desi community there. But the way a lot of the structures in the US were such that the intersectional like thinking, you know, in terms of organizing doesn't happen, is not allowed to happen. So it's basically what whiteness allows to enter, and when they can take that privilege away, right? So coming back to Nepal and suddenly finding myself in the higher up, you know, community of higher up like caste, I was like, oh my God, you know, I have so much defensiveness and so much righteous feeling, because in the US, it's easy to sort of say, well, not always easy, but it felt safe to sort of comment on whiteness. But then coming to Nepal, it's like, well, you're Brahmin, you know, you shut up and listen for a long, like develop, you know, you can't just say, oh, I'll listen, right? Like there's still voices inside you where you feel sort of this false sense of wokeness. And so for me, the writings felt really scary at the beginning, and I had to sort of say, okay, this is what I'm struggling with. I feel that I know a lot, you know, and it's easy to sort of just say things and be loud sometimes, and then just say, okay, well, how am I practicing, you know, living like anti-caste? So that's something that I really appreciate, the way like Rukmini facilitates and provides space. So I was like, let's do this. It's a good start to sort of look at where that righteousness is coming, what it's getting in the way of, right? And how to sort of look at this journey for me, like what's ahead. Yeah.
Thanks, Ravi.
Yeah, I could go next.
No,
Sorry,
please.
yeah, Shreya, go ahead, please.
No, it's okay. You can go ahead.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so I mean, I think I come in with like what we're actually here for, sort of internalizing and, you know, looking at the inner self when you talk about casteism. I think that is what sort of the reflections were designed in such a way, and that really got me like thinking. there were points during the week when I remember Poonam had initially, like last week when we were discussing, she spoke about how she felt like agitated and, a little restless and uncomfortable. I think that's something that I felt throughout the week when I was thinking about casteism within me. There was like thinking about each of the different varnas and how I relate to them within me. I think that sort of brought about this realization of how I'm probably anti-caste outside, but there's also a lot of work to be done within me to sort of mirror those same beliefs within. So I think that was sort of the major reflection that I had, and that put me in a lot of sort of uncomfortable moments throughout the week. But it was definitely very, very enlightening to see this perspective of caste and to see this, like to have these line of thoughts about caste and casteism. So I think that's what brings me here, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what others feel and how they reflected over the past week.
Thanks, Rohini.
So before I start, I'll be honest that I did not spend the amount of time I thought I would, or even give these reflections. I did, like someone else pointed out before, I sat with them for a bit, not as long as I would have. But what I realized in those bits of time that I gave was that it was all very new. The way, the questions that you were asking, they were first of all very intriguing, but they were things that I had not thought of before because, like Rohini pointed out, we've looked at caste externally, like how it plays in front of our eyes, that is in our newspapers or in our phones, that is how it plays out externally to other people. I did not think of how I have internalized this, and I remember saying this even when you had asked us about our thoughts before beginning the journey. And I remember saying that I'm intrigued because I did not even consider this line of thought where how do I internalize caste? How do I look at the varnas when I am carrying out my own life? And so I know I had a lot of interesting observations, and what I sensed from what others also said was that there is a sense of gratitude that at least we have begun the conversation, that the conversation has been initiated, and we can now explore more questions and more. We can explore we can explore more nuanced solutions as well. Maybe not solutions, more answers as to not solving the problem, but understanding the problem even more, not just from the face value, is what I inferred from what everyone else was also saying, that there's a sense of gratitude that I'm glad I came here. I'm glad I showed up. I'm glad I looked at the reflections and I thought about it. So as of now, that's where I am. I'm glad I've begun, but I don't want to stop. I don't want again, like Poonam mentioned last time, there's the sense of agitation, a sense of almost insignificance as to how much can I contribute to maybe dismantling how caste is looked and how people are being treated because of these the stratification that we have done for decades now. So I'm just hoping that this spark, I don't know if you can call it a spark, it seems very positive that way, but some kind of agitation or restlessness, I don't want it to just end with this week. I want it to be there so that I can keep learning and maybe keep talking to people and understanding more about what they think, even if their thoughts might be puzzling to me, or even I won't even be able to comprehend how they make such conclusions. I would want to know what they're saying so that I can understand more about why I don't conform to their thoughts. So that's where I am as of now.
Thanks, Shreya. And hearing that gives me so much hope around that willingness to stay with the discomfort. I think all of us need to draw upon that right now. Thank you.
I think I'm left.
Yes, you and Kavya, you can get started, Poonam.
So one thing is that the agitation and the turmoil that I felt last time, I feel that that's not there now. I'm just feeling a real heaviness and a sadness. I almost feel like grieving or crying that why is it like that? It just seems so, something that started a long time back. It served a purpose. not just to some people, not just to the Brahmin. I mean, I think that the whole Varna thing was done as a mean of spiritual development, that what is it that you needed. But that was thousands of years back. And then over that, we kind of piggybacked, the ones who had it good, and then it just got so solidified into these things. And now it's become so thing that it's almost like, because nobody has tried to look into it and fix it. It's almost become putrid. It's smelling now. I mean, it's almost, and I think what we are doing maybe at one level is the work of, in a very weird way, what's coming to me is the work of the Brahmins doing the Shudras work. You're doing the cleaning up of actually clearing up the mess of how it became such a mess. So I made this little diagram. I work very visually. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see it? I'll put a paper behind it. Wait. Should I put it up or down?
A little bit. We can see the human figure, not really the writing.
So,
Maybe if you
basically, I thought, is the head the Brahmin, and the hands are the Vaishyas because they are doing the work. The feet, but the feet are also then the Avarna because they are doing this thing. Shudra is then the rest of the legs because then you're doing what does that make the Kshatriya, the whole body? I couldn't really figure that out because some of them fitted in very well, but maybe the Kshatriya is almost uh, the whole thing integrated because it's the protection or so all the questions that you asked, I went through those, and those had been in me. I mean, when I'm doing my artwork, when I'm doing my cleaning, these questions keep coming up, and none of the questions, when you putting them into the little slots of, this is like when you're in a more thinking mode, it's a more Brahminical thing, and if it's a more sweeping cleaning, it's the avarna, and then if it's the doing thing, so those things, that was interesting and that was new to put it into, to give it a name maybe. So an interesting, just an incident very quickly that I'd like to share with you is that my dad had COVID, and both my parents, they're alone, they're in Delhi, so I had to fly down. I was with them for about a month, so there was no staff, no maid, nobody. And here, when I live on the farm, so I'm from Bangalore, my parents are in Gurgaon, so I live on a farm. We have about 7 or 8 people working with us. Uh, there suddenly the staff had stopped coming. Nobody was there. So right from the cooking, the cleaning, everything, because both my parents were in bed, and I had to do everything. And after 1 month, when they were like, when I was coming back, the thing both of them said was, we didn't realize that you could do that much of the work and that much of physical work, like right from the jhadu pocha, cleaning the toilets. I mean, I had to do everything. And for me, actually, that was not the biggest point. The more difficult thing with me was the emotional thing of what I was doing. Here my parents could be going. And it was very interesting to see that the point that they thought would have been the hardest for me was actually not the hardest. Because even at home, I'm always doing the jhadu pocha, I'm cleaning, I'm dusting. It's almost meditative, actually, doing that kind of thing. It gives you that quietness in your own space. Nobody else is intruding in your space. So that was very interesting to see that what they thought would be the most difficult one was actually the easiest one for me because I could switch off and I could do that. So, yeah, that's what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thanks, Poonam. And what it brings up for me is doing, let's say, physical work like cleaning when I have a choice around it. And when I know there is a backup and the help might come back someday, as compared to being forced into it as an occupation. That's where, for me, I'm looking at where is the choice for each of the varnas within me. Kavya, would you like to do a quick check-in? We'll do a longer reflection on the questions in a breakout room, but we're just bringing our voices in.
Yeah, Yeah, I wrote to you about this as well, that I feel very held and very safe and very calm in going through this process. I feel like now I have a tool to navigate, to use, to navigate all these whatever restlessness and agitation and not being heard and the frozenness. And I feel I have a very effective tool to use in time to come as I learn more about this relationship of casteism within and without me. So I feel very, very, very calm, very, very safe, even though a lot of different kind of feelings are coming up and they're surprising me. And but there is a calmness, there is a like, okay, yeah, I can see, I'm able to be there in that stillness to see and accept. And the main takeaway for me through the process in the week was about finally not caring even a little bit about how I am seen and allowing myself to see myself fully. So I guess that was where the frozenness and the stuckness and the agitation was coming from, because I was not being seen in my head, like help me or stay with me or let's talk about it, let's be open, let's not point fingers, like I was looking at that kind of space where I was, I guess, worried about how I'm being seen and to correct that. Like, I'm not that. I'm not, I don't feel that. Like, you're looking at me like that, but I don't feel like that. And then somehow that's just not there anymore, giving me so much space to very authentically look inside and how from inside it's coming. Yeah, without. So, feel very calm and thank you.
Thanks, Kavya. And I remember you mentioning your apprehension around entering into this process the last time. So thank you for sticking with it in spite of that. What am I bringing in? Partly hope that there is availability of consciousness of people to work with this. So there is that. There is also a lot of questions around how does one deepen this work and how does one also widen this work, particularly as I noticed that I know that at least 6 of the 8 people that I see on screen are Brahmins, and I'm also wondering about what that means in terms of what is perceived as a safe space and who is it safe for. So, and also, is there capacity and resourcefulness and perhaps lesser degree of trauma in a certain community which enables engagement with this work? And if so, how do we continue to use that privilege? So those are questions I'm sitting with right now. It'll be helpful for us to also get space for deeper sharing around the questions that have that we engaged with in the week, and also perhaps some responses that have emerged from within. Specifically, the invitation is to work with these 2 questions in breakout rooms, and we'll not record this part. So 2 questions, and of course you can add more, but the 2 invitations are around what is it specifically that you encountered around the castes within, in terms of any specific aspect that spoke out more or did not speak out, and so on. And based on that, what's the impulse right now? What is it that you're feeling called to do in terms of taking this journey forward within yourself? So That's the impulse that I'm talking about. For some of us, it may be in terms of continuing reflection. For some of us, there may be some sort of a call to action. For some of us, it may emerge in a certain way. So it could be different impulses for each of us. So that's the invitation right now. I'm also putting up the questions on the chat here so that we have it for reference while we step into breakout groups. Yeah. So we are at 12:30. We'll do a 15-minute breakout where you can bring in deeper sharings, and once we come back, we can bounce off each other's reflections, bring back any inspirations or even agitations that emerge in the breakout room, and then we look at the way forward. So I'm going to pause the recording. Right, welcome back. So we can use the next few minutes to share anything anyone wants to bring in based on what you've heard from each other. Questions, inspiration, anything at all.
Just a little thought. All three in our group had a issue with the money part of the business part. I mean, we can do the work, but how do you charge? Do we put always the other people first and us last? I'm just wondering, is it also a woman thing?
Perhaps, yes.
Just a thought on that, yeah.
Yeah, while we are looking at caste in isolation, that there are layers to it, right? There's gender, there's class, there's all of that. Yeah.
Because my husband and most of the men I know never have an issue with that. I notice it more with the women. It's like, it's always we are backing off just a little bit. It's the slightly more masculine women who are little like this. They don't have a trouble with this. So yeah, thank you.
There's this lovely film, a short film, it's about 20 minutes long, called Chicken at Swami's Kitchen. I wonder if it's still available on YouTube, but so it basically speaks about this young boy, probably like an 8-10-year-old boy who goes to school and sees his classmates bringing non-vegetarian food in their lunch boxes, and he comes from this very typical Tamil Brahmin family where it's not allowed, and he somehow manipulates his mother into giving him some money for a school trip or something like that, and then uses the money to sneak into this restaurant which serves biryani, and has he relishes his chicken biryani there, and how and then he ends up leaving the receipt from the restaurant in his pocket, and the mom discovers it, and then there's this whole Brahminical intervention at home around it with the grandmom and everybody else, and later in the movie the father kind of, everybody expects the father to be harsh with the boy, and the mom goes and says, don't beat him up and all of that, and the father pretends to be angry in front of the whole family, and then later the boy, I think a few days later, the boy happens to see the father in the same restaurant in some corner having his biryani, and then the whole narrative is around how women hold the Brahminism in a patriarchal society. It's a job of the women to hold up the Brahmin, whereas the men can transact outside. So when you're speaking about what you shared, Poonam, about the discomfort with money. A lot of time when we look at the gendered lens around caste, we realize the feminine tends to hold up the Brahmanism and the masculine holds up the rest. And that's also an interesting cross-section view of gender and caste and how that pans out. Anyone else?
I think, as you mentioned, women, like one of the things that I find a lot of sort of the anger within me is also a lot of the times caste is talked about, but we never really critique ways in which, like, you know, marriage, the institution of marriage also participates in upholding that. And so and you know, like the empty criticism of sort of like, okay, you shouldn't get married, you know, and it's not true for everyone, right? Like sometimes that's the only way you can get shelter and food, you know, because it's not because it's such a great institution, it's because it's the only option, right? And so often there's that gap of, I think, sort of how to, even if one finds themselves married, like what were the choices, what were the reasons, and to think about marriage in a different way. So sort of stick it to the system, even if it's not visible, right? Because it's very contradictory to me to critique caste and not really look at how marriage, you know, because I have chosen to not get married because that's also a privilege in itself. And marriage still benefits me, even though I don't marry, because of who my grandfather was. And there was property left, which will be left for me, right? Like, so then I know I already benefited from marriage. So it's been a while. It's like that. Like, how do we do this work in this nuanced way where we can be uncomfortable, but it's also sort of not pointing fingers? Because that's something of an impulse for me, like long term, to also work around. Like, you know, how can we sit around and say, okay, yeah, I choose to get married. Now, what am I going to do this work in the family and in the spaces you know, especially for like cisgender, you know, Brahmin, like married women. Yeah.
That's interesting you brought that up, that actually not getting married. I never thought of it that way, that it's a privilege to certain levels. The choice to get married or not married. I mean, you know, in India, it's like when you go to school, you do this, you do that, then you get married, then you have. I mean, it's like a thing. And then, really, who is it that who can step out of that system? Probably it's
Yeah,
among the highest. Yeah, it's
not
not
having that independence, right? Because they will drive you mad until you get married. Like, it happens, but having the choice to say, I will not talk to these people and I will like invest in these friendships who will keep me sane, right? Like, it is really tough, but I'm one of the lucky ones, you know. Yeah.
I love how all of us were nodding on that. Like all of us agree on so many different levels on that. Um, I think what Rukmini shared also brought in another reflection for me. It's like when I look at women, of course they're, you know, made like they somehow seem to be upholding the Brahmanism, but it's also like along with the Brahmanism, it's also probably the Shudra plus the Avarna, where they sort of go about in the house doing all the household work. And so it seemed interesting to me how the general status of women in society and the general status of the low like the so-called lower castes in society, how they sort of mirror each other, how our attitudes towards them uh, mirror in both these situations.
just to go with Rohini and I was sharing this, that I resent the Avarna tasks that I have to do, and not because of the tasks, but because of my role as a woman. It's that the woman has, because I'm the woman in the house, all the dirty work is left to me. And it's that, and I ask because, it's not like this, it's not out of lack of care, but the answer I was given, we don't notice the dirt. And I'm like, what do you mean? It's convenient for somebody else to not to do the work. But so there, yeah, and I know that I wouldn't want anybody else to do it. Like, I don't want a maid or anybody else to do this work. So I know it's my thing, but I feel it's everybody's task, and it's not just mine.
The other point that came up in our group was the thing about being the Kshatriya, that because we are women, we always have this sense of, hypervigilance or this thing around our bodies, that you always have to be protective of your space, because somebody will always touch or try to, or whatever, something. And I just had the feeling that it's almost the negative side of the Kshatriya. We are so consumed in almost like self-defense that we can't really go out. I mean, there's two parts of the thing. One is to go out, and I was just wondering if there was that, can I be so strong and so in my center that I don't need to have that vigilance or that thing, because nobody will come that close. I'm exuding such strength that issue of self-defense is not coming up, because I'm walking like this. I'm like a warrior, So I just, because I realized that in my life for the last 3-4 years. I mean, I hit menopause and stuff, and things changed, because people don't look at you the same way, men, or, you are now, I feel in many ways, in this marginalized, you're this crone, or, the mystic woman. And it's really nice, that so then I can now move on to this other part where I can really claim my strength and push that. And I'm just wondering if there are these two sides to the Kshatriya. And for the first, I don't know, 40-50 years of our life, we just spend in, as women especially, as in defending ourselves, as our children, it's like this, yeah.
It's very interesting. I didn't think of it that way because I really don't step out. I have extreme COVID paranoia. It drives me crazy. I'm the one who keeps telling everyone to sanitize constantly. Sometimes I feel like I'll start seeing trees because that's the amount of sanitizer or spray I'm using. It's a rather unrelated point, but actually I dropped my grandparents to the airport yesterday, and I stepped out after I don't I don't even know when at the last time I stepped out, and I was just thinking. I was very excited actually to go out because I was excited to see the outside world. And I stepped out and I was like, this is just anxiety inducing. I have to be on guard every minute. And I was with my brother and I was thinking that's so lucky. I mean, you're not thinking as much as I am. You're not thinking, oh, there was a huge lift in the airport. And I was just thinking, if my brother wasn't just standing right next to me, I wouldn't go there if I was alone. I would try to make sure I had 4 or 5 other people. While I don't know if this is a observation about caste, that's why I found it very interesting what he said. But it's always you're on guard, and sometimes I feel like I can't stroll in a garden without just look at the flower without thinking someone's going to come and attack me, because I know that happens. I know that happens. I know that has happened to some of my friends, and maybe the less violent part has happened to me with myself. Especially because when I used to go to college, it was quite far away. So just being on guard at all times, it's almost exhausting. It's I don't know, it makes me really angry that my brother doesn't have to do that. And that's what happens whenever I'm traveling with my brother. I'm constantly observing how he is handling these social situations, especially even in trains. I'm just thinking constantly, how different are we? How much do I have to think? Can he listen to music on his phone? Can he be indulged in that activity without being
I don't know, without having the fear of being, I don't know, just violated, in like invading your space, like someone else invading your space. Because even in trains, actually, when I used to travel, my grandparents used to tell me at all times that don't listen to music the entire time. If you do, keep one earphone in, don't keep both of them in, so that you are on guard at all times. Because there were a couple of times when I used to travel in the mornings, which was around 6:37. Even in Mumbai, sometimes the trains used to be really empty and it was almost eerie. While I enjoyed the solitude I used to get, I couldn't enjoy it fully because I was just thinking, okay, there's a man there. What if he climbs inside? And and I was like, okay, next today I'm going to be tomorrow I'm going to appear on the newspaper. I'm going to be the headline, that's that's what I was thinking of, but from a gendered perspective. I did not think of it the way she pointed out. So I don't know, I found it very interesting, and I have shared this with my friends as well, and even older uh, friends of mine who have said that it's very exhausting after a point to trap. It's like it's to go outside is also, even after the pandemic, it's obviously scary that you might get infected, but there's always been this fear for us that something could happen to our lives without the virus. You remove the virus out of the picture and still it's unsafe. That's what I feel like. Even in Mumbai, where the lights are on till 12 a.m. It's not like other cities that have gone where 8 p.m., especially southern cities, southern part of India. I've seen that the lights are off very quick. And that scared me even as a kid. I was like, why are people not moving? I'm with my family, so I'm not scared that something will happen to me. But I'm picturing, okay, what if I'm walking alone and the shops are shutting at 8? How does it work out for women here? How does it work for young girls here? Even in northeastern parts of India, I observed that around 7 p.m. it's already very dark. How do you handle that space? How do you live your life? Do you shut your shop before 7? I don't know, a lot of questions. Again, I feel like this is a very gender loaded question, but I'm very happy that she pointed that out, because I didn't think of it. I didn't attach the caste narrative to it, which could be something that I can explore it. So thank you.
Thanks, Shreya. Caste has a lot to do with the right to our bodies, and different castes have different levels of right to our own bodies, and that's another interesting exploration to work with. Interesting and very disturbing.
That was, everyone's share is so powerful. Like there is something I want to respond and then someone else says something and then something else comes up. So yeah, what Shreya shared was, of course, it must have resonated with all of us women here at another level itself. But it's also bringing, for me, this, there is collective human consciousness, and then there is collective female consciousness, collective male consciousness. So somehow I feel like with her share, I got a peek into a probable collective Kshatriya consciousness, because what are they? I don't like using words they and us and other and he and she, but right now I'm not sure what to use. But what does that collective Kshatriya consciousness in that physical presence feel like, who are from that ancestral lineage, and they might be carrying that sort of unsafeness, and there's something that as a human that we can resonate with that, with our own personal experience without even separating. So something like that opened up for me with that share of this possible of deeper resonance. You can't understand, you can't feel completely what the other is going through, but in these moments is when you can allow yourself some space to feel in the resonance. So yeah, that's what came up for me. And I would also like to just share, I'm not sure where this is going, but those are the most interesting parts to explore, I feel, because you don't know what the end is and why is this coming up. So since this since this exploration has started for me in the week by myself, and I was looking into my personal experiences within and also with people, one thing like really stood out for me, and was I have a friend, a very close friend who sees herself as an SC, and I respect that. But it's very interesting that uh, she, like when we travel together, we travel a lot together. I'm usually the first person to use a common toilet first, so that I can go in and check if the toilet is clean enough for her to then come and use. And she's very she's very um, passionate about the cause. So there are groups that she works with, and there are writings that she does and surrounding casteism. But then everyday life, when I observe this, like uh, I knew I needed this for myself, so I engaged in cleaning certain common toilets previously, like a couple of years back in my life, to really feel and get that division, separation out of my body. Like I knew it would disgust me, but somewhere in my awareness, I knew that I also needed to experience that cleaning, not just my own toilet, but cleaning a common toilet. And so somewhere, I guess that within the people that I move through, a certain hypocrisy also like troubles me, that uh, and that's why this process is looking inward is so useful, of how that can be brought out in activism. So I don't want to say that I've seen this, I've seen that, but we want to recognize the hypocrisy, a place where we can recognize that hypocrisy and hold it in compassion. And that is what came up for me in my exploration as a Dalit, like the Dalit within me, that if I can give room to that Dalit within me, then I feel that Dalit consciousness is the most aware consciousness, the most non-judgmental consciousness to hold and give space in compassion for every kind of polarity and hypocrisy that exists within us. And there is, and uh, what's alive for me at the moment is this, for me, this very possibility of this very symbiotic and comfortable relationship between the Dalit and the Brahmin. Maybe that means the mind and the body. Like I'm feeling very hopeful in finding that movement. And in that movement, I don't feel the need to do anything, put myself out there and support a cause or not, but just through that if I can become more aware of that movement, then with every, I don't have to go after situations, but when situations present themselves, I can be more present, and that makes me feel very secure and relaxed and safe, and that is very important for me. Like I've had my, I don't want to feel uncomfortable and angry and agitated anymore. Like I want to work from a place of safety and security. Yeah, that I didn't know where this was going, but I just feel like a very wonderful experience in the body just sharing that. So thank you.
Thank you.
It's interesting you said about the toilets, because I remember when I went for my Vipassana, one of the chores they always give you is you've got to clean the toilet for a few days. And I was like, yeah, it's no problem. But a lot of other people don't leave the toilet the way you leave your toilet. It's a mess. And it's different cleaning your toilet and somebody. I mean, that was the big realization for me. So when I came back after that, I mean, this was 10 years back, I always check my toilet, I clean it, because I don't want, the girl or anybody to go through that. It's not a nice, I mean, I don't want to give her. So I mean, when you talk about what were the things that you do going forward, I think it's, for me, it was about being a little bit more mindful about, like, I always pick up my cup and plate, put it back. You don't leave it lying around. So it's like this thing. And the toilet was one of the things that came up, that I make sure. And even in the talk, my talk was day before, one of the mindful exercises was always to finish the loop. After you eat your food, wash your plate, put it back. After you finish your bath, make sure you clean the bathroom. And maybe those are little things that we can do, because it's just to be considerate of the other person, in the small way. Because it's like, you talk about, do you look at them, or do you always, I mean, everybody who works, we know them, we know their children, we know their family. And that's maybe just a little bit we can do starting off, because I don't know if I'm going to go out and do activism, or, but we can make a difference. It's like a little circle that we can maybe, spread further. Thank you.
Thanks, Poonam. Sitting with everything that's shared, and in my head, there's a visual emerging, and that visual is also very close to Theory U, if any of us here have worked with Theory U before. I'm going to attempt to share what's emerging for as of now. What we seem to be saying is there are these sort of shadow sides to elements of caste that we are in touch with. And so when we say, for example, this connection between the Brahmin on the one hand and the Avarna on the other, and how somehow there seems to be this strange sort of a friendship going on there. It's interesting to note how they are the shadows of each other, right? So when you look at the Avarna out in the world, we're talking about people that are essentially invisible, right? People who clean up after us. If you look at the Indian sanitation workers, for example, right? We're one of the few countries in the world that still uses manual scavenging. And these are people who do their work in the middle of the night where the rest of the world is asleep. And when we wake up and go out to work in the morning, the roads are cleaned, whatever sewage work is done. Most of us don't even know what exactly that work entails or how it's done, but it's done under very terrible circumstances, and these workers are invisible. Similarly, if you look at the unconscious perpetrator Brahmin archetype, it is largely about appearing only in sort of priestly ways, in ways where they're expected to be treated as being this ultra pure uber human kind of a space where again there is a huge sense of disconnection with reality, right? I mean, they live in a space of their own which is not necessarily connected with the ground reality of what the world is like, because there is an extreme sense of privilege and hence that sense of, in a way, unconscious collusion between these two, because it's it's the shadow side of each other, right? The two sides of the same coin. Again, if we look at yet another set of mirrors, we have the Shudra consciousness, and the consciousness of Shudra is largely around, and when we're speaking about the unconscious Shudra, which is lived out in a way that is not acknowledged, right? It's a habitual Shudra in us. It is largely about concern with self. It's not so much self and maybe one's inner circle, not so much about concern with what's happening out in the world and what do I do about the world, but the conversation of the Shudra is about how do I make my ends meet, how do I make sure that I do just enough labor to make sure that my my immediate surroundings are okay. My toilet is clean, but I don't want to be looking at everybody else's, right? So that there's that extreme consciousness of self, and the unconscious Kshatriya is around the system and systemic consciousness. But again, when it comes from a space of unconscious engagement, the Kshatriya emerges as this angry activist, not a warrior in the sense of looking at how do I contribute and become the change I'm aspiring for, but really to go out and say the world is bad and things are not okay, and what does everything needs to change. But it comes from a space of protesting in a way that Raji, you named earlier as the sense of righteousness, which comes in judgment of others. It's not righteousness in the sense of knowing and having a sense of right, not from a space of intuition, but really from a space of judgment. And in the process, there is also the unconscious Vaishya, who is transacting, right? Who's doing business with the world. Everything is a resource, right? Everything can be exploited. Everything is transactional. And hence that sense of connection is lost because everything is just a resource, right? From this place. So again, these two collude in a way of blaming each other, because one is saying, I'm out there protesting on the streets and you are not out there, you are sitting at home and being convenient and worrying about yourself. So that there's this blame that's going on between the Shudra and the Kshatriya consciousness in the habitual, when we embody them in the habitual sense of the term and not in the conscious sense of the term. And the inner approach that we're talking about really is to look at flipping this around to say, how do we engage with each of these? Because they're still outer realities. We can't, there is no point in denying them and pretending they don't exist, because that's also really unconscious privilege, which does not work for anyone. But really to say, how do we work with each of these in a manner that is conscious, that is inner, and that is deeper? It's based on presencing rather than blaming. And here is where we can tap into looking at the Avarna consciousness as something that is the resourceful part of us, right? Which is able to adapt, to manage, to step up to various occasions. These are assorted qualities, assorted aspects of us which are normally invisible, normally not accessed, but when they are needed, they step up, they do what needs to be done. And in a way, these are spaces that, these are aspects of ourselves that we can step into by really sensing and listening to what is needed in the moment, right? So various aspects of us which are not always used but are available to us. Similarly, if you look at conscious work with the Shudra consciousness, the Shudra is what makes possible, art, artistry, sculpture, crafts. Poonam was asking earlier in chat about, what about artists? And typically, if you look at the Varna system, traditionally, Shudras are artists. They're sculptors and potters and, people who make like very physical art. They create beauty in the world if engaged with consciously. right? And that there's so much beauty and culture available because the Shudra consciousness is accessed well, right? When it's not accessed well, then there is mass production of things, and that there is that sense of harmony and beauty is lost. But when accessed well, the Shudra consciousness is about how we can create beauty by using our body, right? How do we dance in a way that or how do we sing in a way that that harmonizes the environment around, that comes from active conscious use of the Shudra within. If you look at again the conscious use of the Vaishya within, it is about how do we transact, but transact in a way that we create an equitable world. How do we look at peddling resources in a way that benefits everybody, right? Not just looking at profit, but profit with a purpose. How do we bring in the idea of conscious capitalism, that's the active use of the Vaishya consciousness here. Then there is the other end of the Shudra, which is the Kshatriya. When used consciously, we're talking about warrior, and we're saying a spiritual warrior, right? Someone who's not someone who might be an activist, but that activism does not come from a space of being against anything, but really activism for a world that works for all. Right? And that there's a difference in the energy there when one is fighting against someone or something as compared to when someone is fighting for something or someone, that the energy of it is extremely different. Up there is a lot of blame in the Kshatriya activism when it's unconscious. Down there, when it's conscious activism, that there is a lot of compassion that it comes from, right? It's not coming from a space of blame, but really from a place of saying, here is how we can contribute, right? We are in that sense truly being volunteers for the world, volunteering ourselves to see how we can contribute to the world. And similarly, when we speak of the Brahmin consciousness from this space, it largely is around listening to life. It's about looking at sensing, presencing, and looking at what does life want to do? What's the wisdom that I'm yearning or gaining from life in this moment? And how do I bring it to everybody? How do I make that accessible to everybody? So it doesn't come from a space of privilege, but from a space of being able to be a channel for privilege, not to hold the privilege and hoard it, but really how do I channel privilege for everybody? Right? Because there is, of course, a lot of access to privilege. For example, the fact that when I put out work like this, I can put out work like this with my Brahmin surname, and I know I will be safe about it. If I were a Dalit and putting out this work, I would be construed as an activist, perhaps anti-national, and there could be all kinds of allegations around doing this work, which which doesn't, and all those allegations don't come with the safety of being Brahmin. And how do we therefore access that internal Brahmin and become a channel where privilege can be utilized and worked with actively for the benefit of the world? So of course, it's not any form of a definitive model. It's a possibility, it's an approach, and it is emergent. It is what I'm sensing into in this moment, and hopefully it'll evolve for me and for us collectively as we go along in this journey. So let me shut up there and come back to the group. And Poonam says spiritual warrior who also completes their own journey. Absolutely. And that's where we don't polarize, right? When we're consciously journeying, then we are co-holding the polarities. We're holding the Avarna and the Brahmin. We're holding the Kshatriya and the Shudra. functioning holistically as the Vaishya. So not polarizing, not you versus me, but to say you and me, and how do we work together. So let me end my monologue there. We've got 5 minutes. Would love to hear a quick checkout in terms of, as you hear all of this, what emerges for you as possibilities of continuing your work with Casteism?
I think what's coming to me is like this realization that, just like how binaries are so harmful, this is another categorization where it's making it more sort of messy, just to say we don't know, and saying we can be all of these things in different times of the day, different minutes, seconds, hours. And so when do we realize who we are the most, right? How we have been conditioned. And so to be mindful and also to have these conversations with, for me, like the people that I can influence, right? Like, the people I'm in a relationship with, like my parents, because there's the most incentive in them wanting to really think about, and also doing it with care, to like noticing how their bodies are, how my bodies are, like when we are interacting about it. So it's not just this very, people need to change, do this, do that, but more of a gentle way of bringing a more sustainable change, I guess. Yeah, thanks.
I'm left with a sense of an iceberg. So what I've seen so far, even the reflection work you've guided us through this week, I just felt it's the surface. There's a lot more that I need to go into and not more to discover. So I'm feeling that there's a lot more work ahead. And that's what I want to engage with in the future, with just thinking more deeply about it. So.
Thank you, Sunny.
Can I go next? So 2 things. So it's interesting that you spoke about this, the mirroring of the Brahmin and the Varna. Because today morning when I was actually sketching my caste structure, which was inside me, this realization came to me that the listener should also be the cleaner. Otherwise, the transformation is incomplete, right? Because if you're listening to life, but it's nothing doing to the cleaning part, what you're listening and doing what with it. So there's some more work to do there to integrate the listener and the cleaner within, because that kind of might settle the space for the warrior and the manager to emerge, like in more balanced way. So that's one. And the other, which I was also telling in the group, is starting. So I look at it that one is you, of course, transform yourself, but these are powerful questions. And I wanted to ask you, Rukmini, if we have the freedom to share the questions out to a larger circle of people. And because I think that starting, I would want to engage with these questions with family and moving forward to the groups I work with, because if we are asking for a shift of mindset of just equitable in terms of work, caste being seen as a task allocation and who got the best and who got better and who got the privilege, rather than going inside and saying all of it is levels of consciousness you deal with. It's a different kind of space to be in. So I want to really engage more people whom I work with and deal with on a day-to-day basis, and I would need your help with that. And so also a request for that. And also in the course of wellness that I run, I have started asking myself that how does caste consciousness inside of us contribute to our wellness, sense of well-being, and how what I learned today can I integrate in the courses of wellness that I run. So these are the the next steps that I feel very present to.
Thanks, Girija. So one of the things I'm doing is to compile all the questions into a workbook, which I'll mail all of us. I'll also integrate the model that's emerged today into it. As I started creating the workbook, I did put in a word of caution there in terms of don't share with someone who's not been oriented to this work. I mean, just as a word of caution, because caste is a very sensitive, politicized issue. Having said that, if you feel you can orient them and then step into the questions, by all means, please feel free to then share. So long as you're holding space for them while they navigate through it.
Can I go?
Yeah.
Actually, I was talking to a friend yesterday, and we were talking about duality in terms of nationality, not necessarily caste, and how a lot of politics, a lot of things that are politicized all over the world become narratives of us versus them, because each group is trying to find that purity, is chasing for that purity. So any issue ends up becoming an us versus them issue, because all of us want, I don't know, obsession with purity at some level, that no, we are completely and absolutely dash. There is no, in the larger space, this feels like a safe space, but in a larger space, in ideas of a country or a state nation, there is this need for everyone to say that I am completely something or someone. No, there is no acknowledgement of duality, or even I don't know if there's a word for it, but just multifaceted personality. That is, your nationality can also be multifaceted. I mean, who you are is definitely multifaceted, whether you want to accept it or not. Sooner or later, you'll realize, even if you trace your lineage, you'll realize you're an amalgamation of many things, religions, languages, a lot of things if you go into it. So that's what we were talking about yesterday, how there's this obsession for purity. Now, since you raised the question, that is, how do we move forward? I was thinking of saying that, I will read up more. I will, I don't know, just explore the topic more. And I was just thinking, after everyone else shared their thoughts, how am I going to approach this, in the sense that, how am I going to look at it? Even though yesterday, when I was talking to my friend, I was condemning this narrative of fitting yourself, of trying to fit yourself into an us box, and assigning someone else the them box. So how do you, since clearly yesterday we have condemned it in my conversation with my friend, I have said that, this can be, it's difficult. If you look at issues like that, it becomes difficult to arrive at solutions. I have basically condemned it yesterday, but I was thinking, now that I'm moving forward, how am I going to be looking at it? Am I going to divide myself into us versus them? If yes, is that the right way to approach it? If not, how am I going to approach it? I feel like these are the questions I'm going to look at. If I'm going to read up more, I'm going to talk to more people, I also want to know how I'm going to be approaching it, because there has to be some difference or some learning if I'm approaching people, right? Because it feels like I might be heading towards the us versus them narrative, and I don't know if that's going to be beneficial. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. A lot of people shared their thoughts, and this is all that came to me. Because even in the breakout room, Kavya shared some thoughts and some views, and I felt like that is something I didn't think of. Yesterday, I was condemning the us versus narrative for most political issues in our country, or even the world. So how am I going to look at caste, and how am I going to read up? So that is basically the questions I'm going to sit with. How do I approach? If I'm going to approach that, which is clear, I'm going to approach these issues. How am I going to look at it? That is it's looming rather large to me today, but I'm excited to see how I do it.
Yeah. For me, I find it helpful to also articulate for myself the why before I step into the how, because otherwise the how can be an unconscious mirroring, right? I mean, when I condemn the us versus them, I'm also getting into an us versus them when I stick to the how and stick to the strategy. So it helps to step out of there, articulate the why, and then come back to the how from the why.
I can go. Uh, I thought it's I really like the diagram, the way it came out, because it somehow just made this distinction between the microcosm and the macrocosm. I mean, the casteism and all those things are not out there; they're also in me. And if I cannot work on the outside so easily, and I don't want to get into activism and things like that, then here is the battleground that I can work on myself. And maybe just as this affects this, I don't know how, if my changing can affect somebody, but maybe it could, maybe by example, maybe whatever. So it was nice to see the flip. Even in our conversation, we talked about actually conscious capitalism, how the way it could turn into that. About the spiritual warrior, we did. About the Brahman, about being moving to a higher level of consciousness or thing, and leaving the dogma, and and maybe those are the things. If it's doable, because for me, working on myself is much easier than going out and doing things on people, because there is maybe a little level of control over here. It's and like we say, maybe by example, yeah. And if you have any leads on how to go further with this, or to be with you on this, whatever, I mean, I don't know how it would translate on the outside.
May I go next? Oh, sorry,
Sure.
Rohini, you go ahead.
No, Kavya, it's okay. You can go ahead. I can go next.
Thank you. So the first day when we had this exercise of exploring our inner caste structure with colors and just a diagram, this is what came up for me, and it didn't fully make sense. And the message that came up for me with this was like to receive abundantly so that you can give unconditionally. So this was the message that came for me, which did not make sense to me with the idea of what we were doing then. But for me now in this, as I also listened to everyone's closing, and especially how Girija expressed herself, I feel now I can now understand what that means. That for me, like planning and doing, like, this is what I'm going to do, this is my impulse, let's do this, that just doesn't work. So this idea of being really fully present to whatever's coming your way. So like, I felt an opening listening to Girija. It doesn't have to come from me, but when I listened to her and the way she used her words, I allow those ideas to move in me, and maybe when it's necessary, it will come out of me. So this message of being open and present to like fully receiving, so that you can also be available to give fully. So that is what's moving in me, like now, to receive and then give, receive and then give, to not go give and then expect. Maybe that's what has been for me. Like now, maybe I should just reverse it a little bit, is what feels that's coming to me right now as a message. And I also want to thank everyone. This was like a beautiful journey for me. Thank you so much. My heart is, yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Kavya.
I can go next. And Kavya, that was a very beautiful depiction. So thank you for sharing that with us. I think on the whole, this journey, like from last week, over the week and today, it's kind of instilled a bit of a patience in me, in that like going forward, whatever work I undertake in this space around caste or around casteism, be it at the personal level or in terms of engaging in discussions, I think I would be able to be a little more patient in letting people have their own sort of take their own time and have their own space in exploring and understanding what this means. So the way I was able to, take this week's time to delve deeper into this has sort of given me a structure, but also given me the patience to, like, uh, for a lack of a better term, tolerate other people's lack of understanding about caste and casteism and give them that space. And probably, um, like I was provided with this structure to think through it, I could facilitate the same structure or like similar questions for them to think about it. So if, the impulse that I feel is definitely activism, but then even in activism, I think um, it's like it's a bit calm. It's I see a structure to it. So I feel a little unusual from how I usually am so like agitated and impulsive about this issue. There I can see the shift in my narrative about it and in my perspective about it. So I think that is what I'm majorly taking away from this entire journey and discussion and the discussions that we've had.
Really wondering what might it be like to reframe the tolerate others to perhaps staying curious about them.
So when I said tolerate, I mean it's still a little, so I mean, and I think this comes from family. For instance, I mean, when so like there is this acknowledgement of, this is like practicing the caste system externally, that's not right. And I mean, there has been injustice that has happened to people because of like because of the system. So there is that acknowledgement. But then some, for instance, say something like marriage, when you talk about like when it's when caste and marriage is sort of spoken in that context, it sometimes it makes me a little angry to see how people cannot see, the very like that practice being like continued in that form or in that sense. Or I mean, if I may, certain conversations that happen around the reservation system in the country. So when these sort of uh, like when somebody, I mean, when people express themselves on like these topics, it sometimes makes me feel uncomfortable. It makes me angry as to how they can be thinking about, how do they not realize that it is not this way. So that is when I meant, like, that is what I meant by when I said tolerate. But yeah, it I mean, I'm still sort of thinking of how I could frame that in a better way.
Not just about framing it, but really to look at what is the space I hold for the other in the process. If I'm holding it as tolerance, then the energy of it is also about doing someone a favor. And that there is separation and there is a sense of casteism even in that act. And hence that reframing, because yes, it's natural to feel anger and agitation and even rage, noticing what's happening out in the world. And at the same time, it's not always resourceful to respond from the same level of consciousness, right? That there's something hitting at you and you're hitting back, and we are still navigating in the same level of consciousness. So doing this work and turning that mirror inward is really about stepping into a different level of consciousness to say, can the solution and perhaps not the solution, but can my response emerge from someplace else? And hence that invitation to curiosity to say, all right, if someone chooses to practice it, what need is getting fulfilled for them, and can we renegotiate with that need?
Yeah, that is, yeah, definitely something that I'll think about and work with. Thanks.
Right, we are certainly over time. Thank you everyone for staying on late. And very importantly, thank you for doing this work. As I said, I will send out a workbook also integrating what we've spoken about today. And hopefully the inner work continues. So thank you so much.